This chapter is Communication Technology and Conducting Meetings, Chapter 6. We're going to talk about basically the proper ways to use technology in the business world and some ways that technology has been abused in our society and in business. And then we're going to talk about conducting meetings, because this seems to be one of the things managers have to be able to do, and most of them don't know where to start. The learning objectives for Chapter 6. First, we're going to define communication technology as it deals with business. Then we're going to give examples of the improper uses of technology and the proper uses of technology. We're going to describe some guidelines for conducting business meetings, and then we're going to add to that what if you have multicultural meetings, because many businesses do today. And then we're going to end with virtual business meetings, because basically a lot of global corporations now are using the virtual medium rather than having people fly all over the world.
Types of devices and programs used in business. Smartphones, we're very familiar with smartphones. Almost everybody has one now. Computers, we use computers for bigger projects. We tend to use iPads or smartphones for most daily stuff, such as text, phoning, emailing, etc. E-readers are becoming very popular. In fact, a lot of elementary schools now are using e-readers for textbooks for students. So in the future, there probably won't be any books as far as paper books, which is, from my standpoint and most older people, kind of a sad situation. Skype is a great way to talk to a group of people, and you can have a conference using Skype and bring in a number of people at once. Video conferencing software. We've used Adobe Connect here in this class, and there's a lot of other video conferencing software that companies do utilize. And of course social media and all the problems that are wrought with the problem of social media.
Definition of communication technology. We have a very narrow definition. It's any electronic system used by business people that fosters communication to achieve their goals. So it's any kind of electronic communication that you are using to have the goals or strategies, relationship with the public, whatever you are trying to do. It's how you use that technology to get the goals of the company activated. Improper uses of communication technology. Management owns the hardware. That's the first thing you need to understand, and the software. And because of this, many times they do not want you to load on your own software. You need to keep business and private life separated, which means have your own computer at home, your own cell phone, even if you have one for work. Keep the two things very separated. The Electronic Communication Privacy Act gives companies the right to monitor all technology that they provide for you to use. They also have the right to limit internet access, so they can close off certain sites. Basically, when you apply for a job and you take a job at a company, there is probably someplace in that pile of papers you signed a consent form that they can monitor your computer. Once you have signed that, they can monitor everything you do on that company computer. In the early days of PCs, there were an awful lot of people, because they were going to places on the internet they shouldn't, who were fired. That has decreased, and hopefully if people simply keep their business and their private lives separate, that will continue to work. There are 5 improper uses of communication technology. The first is simply the law, what we just went over, and that is hardware, software are owned by the company, and they have a right to set the rules on how this can be used. Internet addiction and abuse of the internet in the workplace, going to internet sites that you just shouldn't be at, pornographic sites, cybersexual relationships, scandalous friendships, criminal abuses or uses of the software. None of this should you be doing during work. If you must be involved in these kind of things, have your own computer at home and do this at home. Also, electronic information can be easily stolen. And this is something that you need to realize for your personal use as well as for the company's security. Basically, do your personal online business at home, but also anytime you're using electronic devices out in the public, beware that there are people who are trying to get access to either your phone, your computer, your iPad, any kind of technology that's out there. Don't talk when you're around other people. You never know when a competitor is near. My husband had an interesting situation happen a number of years ago when he got onto a plane, and he was sitting down, and a guy sat down in front of him and started talking on his phone. And airplanes are tin cans. All they do is magnify sound. So my husband had absolutely no problem sitting behind him, understanding every word he was saying. And he was talking about some proprietary information for his company. And the next thing my husband realized is it was a competitor. So here he was sitting, hearing all of this information. And of course, the person made no attempt to keep him from hearing it. I mean, he was sitting in a very public place, an airplane, talking about it. So afterwards, my husband got up and introduced himself. Don't you think that person would like to have crawled under a rock someplace? He had just unintentionally given information to a competitor. In bankruptcy proceedings and other emotionally charged business law cases, basically lawyers have been very upset to see that their obscene language that they use in court is part of official written records. And basically in business, it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be a law situation. You shouldn't use curse words or invectives of any sort, either in your speech or in your writing. Remember that confidential records can be copied, distributed, and sold, which basically makes it very simple to get information. And you need to be very careful where you store information, particularly your personal information and your company information. So it applies to both your home life and your work life. Public behaviors, talking in public places. Make sure you find a secure location where no people are around, where the noise is not going to reverberate and make it easy for people to hear. Sexting basically has no place during the business day. If you're going to be involved in these kinds of activities, they should be done on your own computers or your own cell phones. They should not be done on company. Cyberbullying is not a good thing, and we're seeing more of this in the business world. You're also seeing an awful lot of it, unfortunately, with children and teenagers. But cyberbullying in the business place is not a good thing. And what you want to remember is if you're doing this on company technology, that it is probably being stored somewhere. And if somebody files an EEOC complaint, all they have to do is ask for those records, and they can be brought to the court, and the court can see for themselves exactly what has been done. So cyberbullying is not a good idea. It's not a proper way to manage in the first place, but it has no place being written down. Business technology for personal use, basically, hopefully we've covered this enough already, you should not do it. Have your own personal devices that you use for yourself. Do not use your business phone for personal usage. And remember that technology should not be used instead of face-to-face. There are many situations where using technology can actually cause problems because of misunderstandings, where a 5-minute face-to-face or phone conversation could solve it in a minute. And there are companies now that actually have days when you're not allowed to use technology, no email, no phones, where you have to actually get up and walk around a barrier and talk to your neighbor rather than using technology to communicate with them. It has become a major problem. And I'm now finding that I have students who actually say one of the best things in their basic business communication class that they learn is giving an oral presentation because they don't know how to talk in front of other people. There's just way too much texting going on, even in families, rather than real face-to-face communication. Proper uses of communication technology. Basically, the technology that is on your desk or that you are given to carry around is to get work done for the company. It makes your job a lot easier, a lot faster. Where we used to have to mail things back and forth, now you can have an answer within seconds. It makes doing global business possible because you can leave a message on someone's phone and they can get back to you the next day, or you can send them an email. It makes global business basically much easier to happen. You can work on large files together. You can move large amounts of information between computers via the internet. This is one of the reasons why good security systems are required. I mean, basically, you always want to make sure that your security system is up to date. Finding information is easier than ever. You can get into libraries via their internet sites. You can go to Google Scholar, Bing. You can go to government websites at all levels, U.S., state, city, county, and information is available to you that never was so easily available before. So there's no reason not to have correct information. But it's very important that you make sure you're getting information from credible sites, because anyone can put anything on the internet. That does not necessarily make it correct. This is a chart of all the common communication technology types, some of the associated brands, and the business applications that go along with those. And we've talked about a lot of this, but I think seeing it in a chart is just helpful. Some social networking sites include Facebook, MySpace, Craigslist. Public awareness, marketing uses these an awful lot. They're used in banner ads with for Facebook and MySpace where people can advertise. Person-to-person is still the best type of communication, and face-to-face is even better. But we can use our mobile devices for text messaging, paying bills. We can even go out when we're in the middle of shopping and find out if we can get an item cheaper elsewhere. Search engines, there is no reason not to have an answer for something anymore because it's very easy to go out and find. One of the things, again, you need to be very careful here is that you don't believe everything because it's written on the web. This is particularly true of the wiki encyclopedia. You want to make sure that whoever put that information on there is legitimate. Blogging, Twitter, great way to make people aware of your brand. And then conferencing using Skype and Wimba, which we do in this class, great way to bring a lot of people together over long distances. The only thing that is problematic is time differences. And then e-readers, this is going to be the wave of the future. As much as I like my books, I know eventually I'm going to give them up. I hate the fact that bookstores are just going away because people are buying a lot more e-books. They're not buying paper books anymore. Because I used to just love to go and just kind of peruse whatever was in the bookstore. I bought probably more books that way than any other way. But times are changing. And children are going to grow up always using e-books, so for them this is going to be the natural thing to do. And it's going to be the business person of the future. Over time, the way to conduct a business meeting really has not changed that much. Munter put down basically 3 major divisions in a business meeting, and that's the preparation, participation, decision-making, and follow-up. That has not changed. How we do the meetings may change. They may now be more oriented towards virtual meetings using computers or Wimba or Skype, but you still need to do the same preparation. First thing is, you need to know what type of a meeting you're going to have. What channel are you going to use? Is it going to be face-to-face, or is it going to be virtual? You still need an agenda. Everyone needs to know what you're going to talk about. So it's important to do that ahead of time. And it's also nice to give people a chance to change the agenda, to add to it. But everyone should know if they're going to speak and what they're going to speak about. The participation is who should be involved in the meeting. Who are the attendees? And then you need to know something about these attendees. Are they multicultural? And what kind of brainstorming do you want to go on during the meeting? Basically, you need a meeting to solve conflicts, to get a consensus, to identify problems, to discuss sensitive information, solicit support, generate fresh ideas, report on a project's progress, or demonstrate something maybe that needs to be done. If you are just giving out information and people do not need to question it, it's crystal clear, you're probably better off just writing an email. But anytime the people need to participate, it's much better to conduct either a virtual or an actual face-to-face meeting. Also, if you've got decisions that need to be made, you need to decide ahead of time, how are you going to vote? Are you going to vote with a raising of hands? Are you going to actually do a ballot where people mark it secretly and then someone tallies them up? You need to decide ahead of time how you are going to decide majorities. Also, you need to decide how people are going to speak. If it's a small group, you can be informal, particularly if everybody's willing to take turns. If it is a large group, you may want to use Robert's Rules of Order to maintain decorum and make sure everybody gets their chance to vote. Meetings generally should not run over an hour. People kind of lose interest if they get longer than that. So if you're going to have a business meeting that runs all day, you need to have lots of breaks. You need to change what the content is and not always be talking about the same thing to keep people's interest, because it's real easy to lose people. One of the things in conducting a business meeting you want to be aware of is you need to have everyone turn off their cell phones. They do not need to be someplace else. While Americans think they multitask, what actually in the end happens is nothing is done well. Everything is done poorly. And this has been shown over and over and over. And think about yourself. If you've got three things you're trying to do, generally, if you can home in on one of them and concentrate, it's going to be done better than trying to do three things at once. Conducting multicultural business meetings. There are tensions between the different cultures. And part of this is because of just how we grew up and what we learned as proper or not proper. One of those things is eye contact. In many Middle Eastern countries, it is a show of respect for a man not to look a woman in the eyes. In Asian countries, men or women will look away quite often, and even in some Spanish cultures, when they're giving bad news. And it's the looking away that says something can't be done or something's wrong. In the Japanese language, you have to realize there's not even a word for it can't be done. Using words like difficult are how they will say something can't be done. So you need to understand how people are going to use language and what the nonverbals mean. And of course, if you're doing a virtual without camera, you're not even seeing a lot of the nonverbals. So then you're relying on sounds and tones and how people are saying words, which is entirely a different ear and a different way of hearing. So you need to have different strategies in place when you're conducting multicultural meetings. You need to ask lots of questions to make sure you're understanding exactly what the other people are saying. English is generally the language of international business, and it's generally going to be most people's second language. What is even more of a problem is there's 18 varieties of English spoken in the world. You do not always know which variety the person has learned. And the reason this is important is because just because it's English doesn't mean the meanings of all of the words are the same. It is not unusual when English words will have different meanings. And it's important for you to understand that just because a meeting is in English does not mean you're understanding what's being said. And also, you need to give credit culturally. And you need to realize that in some cultures you cannot pick out an individual, that you must give credit to the whole group, that it would be embarrassing to just pick out one individual. So there's these kinds of cultural sensitivities also that you need to be aware of as you're conducting multicultural business meetings. Also, because English is generally going to be the language and it's going to be most people's second language, talking slower will be very beneficial to them understanding you. Talking louder is not. It does not help comprehension. Having some periods of silence as you're talking will also help, because it gives them an opportunity to translate. Conducting virtual business meetings. Some of the problems in conducting virtual business meetings is technology equivalency. So one of the things you want to make very sure of as a company is that if you have places around the world that you have technology that will talk to each other, that you have good internet receptivity, and that you try with all the different time zones to find times when everyone can be there. And make sure that you're not always expecting somebody to be up at 1 o'clock in the morning, that gets passed around. Conducting virtual business meetings. One of the things you have to be very careful about is that you have technology that is equivalent around the world and that you have good internet receptivity. Basically, if you own all the locations, you can control the technology that is there. It's when you're dealing with vendors and such that you may find you have some problems. The temporal clocks. We have different time zones around the world. So if you're dealing with somebody on the exact opposite side of the world, It could be 1 a.m. here and 1 p.m. there. So what you want to make sure you do is try and find the best times for the two to talk. And it shouldn't always be that one side is bearing the brunt of being up at 1 a.m. in the morning. So that needs to be kind of rotated around. But there are things that you need to be aware of, because some people could be very alert and some people could be very tired at the same time. Should you use cameras or shouldn't you? Sometimes it's nice to be able to see the nonverbals, but other times, like I mentioned earlier, it causes problems because people wonder who's off camera. Types of software, the visual versus the audio only. Again, goes back to the camera issue. Do you want to see people, or is the audio enough? You do lose an awful lot of nonverbals by not having visual. So if visual is possible, it's generally a good thing to do.